about wisdom in relationships, the book of Proverbs has so much to say about relationships. And it addresses different kinds of relationships, from marriage to the family dynamic to working relationships and, of course, to friendship. And there is a reason for it, because relationships are the single most important dynamic in our lives. There is nothing more impactful upon us than relationships. We're formed by them, we are hurt by them, we are encouraged by them. And from the moment that we are born into a web of relationships, a family whose impact upon the course of our life cannot be underestimated. Studies show that the quality of friendship in our life is one of the predictors of longevity. If I put that simply, it means that those with good friends tend to live longer than those who don't. Psychologists have demonstrated that friendship is a key for us understanding ourselves. Without significant people in our life, it's very hard for us to see ourselves. In other words, friends act like a mirror, helping us to see our strengths, our potential, as well as our weaknesses. So friendships are not just important to who we are, but are foundational to who we are becoming, which is why they have the power to cause great harm as well as great healing. And whilst the book of Proverbs has a lot of wisdom for us to consider when it comes to some of our most intimate relationships like marriage and the relationship between children and their parents, and we would be really wise to actually spend some time in the book of Proverbs studying that, meditating upon it, thinking about these key relationships and how we're going in it. Today, I'm going to focus in on friendship. And the reason is because friendship is really the basis of any good marriage. And if you are a parent, then hopefully one of the aspirations that you have for your children is that they learn to make good friends. But even more than that one day you will be one of their good friends. So whatever we learn here today, hopefully we can begin to apply in different contexts within our life. So what wisdom does the book of Proverbs offer us when it comes to friendship? The first thing it suggests to us is to choose your closest friends wisely, which of course relates to what I've just been speaking about, that friendships influence us perhaps more than anything else. There is this common saying that goes something like this: you are the average of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. Now think for a moment about that, about your closest circle of 5. You are the average of the best of them and the worst of them. I wonder, how does that make you feel? Do you feel okay about that? How do you feel about that? Proverbs 13 verse 20 says, "Walk with the wise and become wise, for a companion of fools suffers harm." Just meditate on that for a second. Walk with the wise and become wise, for a companion of fools suffers harm. This proverb cautions us to not underestimate the impact of friends upon us, and to therefore be discerning around who we choose to confide in and who we ultimately choose to listen to. In other words, be intentional in surrounding ourselves with those who are wise, in the hope that their wisdom might rub off. Now, the question that then emerges, Tim, are you having problems with my PowerPoint? Are you okay? It's fine. Yeah. The question that then emerges is, well, how do I discern who is a wise and good friend for me that I might want to spend time with? Well, we might want to start by considering how much weight we give to the voices that are around us that exhibit foolish tendencies. I don't know if you remember when Simon spoke and kicked off this series. He gave us a list of the different types of fools that the book of Proverbs brings out. Sometimes comparison is the mother of clarity. It helps us to see things a little bit more clearly. So if we look at the list of fools, these are the kind of people that we might want to try to avoid in terms of being those closest to us. So the mocker is the one who sneers at the idea of submitting to any authority other than their own. The simple, who are too easily led and influenced by others. The troublemaker, who's always stirring up conflict under the guise of just being honest. the sluggard who is lazy, and the undisciplined who cannot delay gratification of their desires, the violent or aggressive who are swift to hurt anyone who gets in their way, and the complacent who live under the illusion of self-sufficiency. So it's good to ask ourselves the questions, have I been listening to people who exhibit these traits? And if we have been, we might want to consider how much weight we give to their voice in our life, and instead look to spend time with those who exhibit the traits of wisdom. Now, throughout the book of Proverbs, there are many traits that come through with regards to the wise. But if I had to reduce it to 4 categories, which is what I've done, I would put it into these sort of subheadings. That the wise are those who prioritize God. In other words, they fear God. They seek righteousness because they know that God is righteous. The wise are those who want to grow and change. They have the humility to know that they don't have it all together. They are self-aware. They're prepared to be vulnerable. The wise are those who take responsibility for themselves. There's a lot that comes through in the book of Proverbs about diligence and self-control and, confession and taking upon yourself the consequences of your own behavior. And then the wise are those who want to live outwards. In other words, they have a generous heart. They want to live towards others in relationship. Now, of course, I put that list up there, and you might be thinking, oh, that's me. She's describing me. But I want to say no one is perfect. And in fact, if anyone who claims to be perfect or is not forthcoming in their struggles, then that's probably a red flag right there. So we're not looking for people who are perfect, who can tick all those boxes perfectly. Rather, we're looking for people in our life who exhibit a trajectory in those areas, who, or at least have a desire to be growing in those areas. They're the kinds of people that we want to be closest to us. Those who prioritize God, who want to grow and change, who are taking responsibility for themselves and want to live outwards. Now, I hear a follow-up question sort of coming into my mind, which is this: but aren't we meant to love everyone as Christians? And from time to time, I hear that when it comes to friendship. And of course, we are called to love everyone in service of our fellow man, but not trust everyone. And the reality is that you cannot have deeper friendships without trust. In fact, there are 3 very important ingredients that come into play in terms of cultivating deeper friendships. And they are this: trust, vulnerability, and respect. The 3 work together. But trust is the foundation of any friendship. Without it, relationships remain shallow or transactional. Trust develops over time through consistent actions, honesty, reliability, and confidentiality. And the deeper the trust, the deeper the connection. But then you also need vulnerability, which is the bridge to depth in a relationship. It's what transforms a relationship from being surface level into an intimate one. And it involves sharing your true self, your fears, your dreams, your struggles and joys, without a mask, without pretense. Vulnerability deepens trust because it shows you are willing to be fully known. And it also invites your friend to do the same, fostering a genuine bond. But then you have this third element that's incredibly important, which is respect, which is the guardrails of friendship. And respect ensures that trust and vulnerability are handled with care, and it involves honoring each other's boundaries, differences, and individuality. It includes celebrating each other, listening, and avoiding manipulation. Now, without respect, trust can be broken and vulnerability can feel unsafe. And these 3 need to work together in deepening relationships. If you think of them a bit like a cycle, trust allows vulnerability to be expressed. Vulnerability deepens trust when met with understanding. And respect protects both trust and vulnerability by maintaining boundaries and dignity. Now, when all of these 3 are present, an intimate friendship flourishes, providing a space where both individuals feel known, supported, and valued. The fact is, we cannot have the quality of this kind of relationship with everyone. It's just not physically or emotionally possible for us. But Proverbs seems to suggest that we do need to have it at least with someone. No matter what life stage you're in, you need someone as an intimate confidant. You need a friend like this for many reasons, but I want to share just one today. Because this kind of deeper relationship actually helps us grow. Which leads to my next point, which is this: friction helps us grow. There's this well-known proverb. I wonder if anyone can quote it, from Proverbs 27, verse 17. As iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. Now, this proverb is describing the quality of a deep and reciprocating friendship. A friendship where each person wants the other to be the best version of themselves. And one of the distinguishing features of this kind of friendship is friction. Now, iron can only sharpen iron through friction. It only happens as the two rub against each other. But if we be honest for a moment, friction in a relationship is not always pleasant. In fact, it can be incredibly hard and even painful. And yet, Proverbs seems to suggest it is necessary for our sharpening. Now, what do I mean by friction? Well, in this context, our close friends, it's when our close friends challenge us in some way. And that can be a whole host of things, from giving us honest feedback, to offering a counter perspective on something, to bringing challenge around our behavior or decisions, to making us aware of perhaps times when we've hurt them or others, to speaking truth in love or disagreeing with us on our ideas, asking us probing questions, all sorts of things. Anything that's going to challenge our character, our behavior, and thinking. But if we take a little bit of a look more closely at the role of bringing challenge within a relationship, what the Bible might refer to as speaking the truth in love, there are a couple of important dimensions to this friction that this proverb in particular has to teach us. And the first principle is the principle of mutuality. Don't you notice that it says, as iron sharpens iron? It is both sets of iron that are sharpening one another. The sharpening is mutual and reciprocating. Over time, a healthy and deepening friendship should result in both parties growing and being sharpened. In other words, both parties challenge each other. It shouldn't be all just one way. That's not the kind of relationship that's being described here. The second principle that comes through here is the principle of motivation. Now, the goal of bringing challenge is to not just bring challenge for challenge's sake, because you enjoy stirring or truth-telling. And, I think we've all met people like that, that just like to stir things up a bit. But that's not the goal here. This sharpening is motivated by a desire that your friend really does grow in flourishing, that they might, so to speak, be a sharper tool in God's tool belt, better equipped to live wholeheartedly for God in the world. So there's mutuality and motivation here. And if these two are working together, then the words of Proverbs 27 verse 6 really ring true. This proverb that says, wounds from a friend can be trusted, but an enemy multiplies kisses. From time to time, a friend might need to deliver a challenge that is painful, because they see that you are off track and you need correcting. An enemy, on the other hand, will just simply let you carry on walking down a path that will ultimately hurt you. And not only will they let you keep walking down that path, but they'll celebrate you as you walk down that path. That's not the case with a trusted friend. A trusted friend is prepared to hurt you if it means saving you from some greater harm. I remember when a good friend spoke to me a particularly hard truth, and it was around a boy I was dating, not Simon. And I had been dating him for about 6 months. He was good looking. He was a musician. And he was a songwriter. And he was, everything a young woman was looking for. But he was also deeply insecure. He was incredibly insecure, and he couldn't handle me spending time with my girlfriends. I'd have to give an account of every hour of the day. He just couldn't handle me spending time or having fun with anyone else apart from himself. And so as a result, I became withdrawn in the relationship. My friendship circle became smaller, and I generally became quite unhappy. And yet I didn't want to lose the relationship because I was afraid of being alone. And my friend saw this in me. And she came to me one day and she spoke to me this hard truth that was really painful. Namely, that I was with this guy not because I wanted to be with him, but because I didn't want to be alone. And in my heart, I knew she was right and that I needed to break it off with him. And I did. And the wonderful thing about this friend is that she sat with me and watched apocalyptic movies, because all I wanted to watch was end of the world kind of movies at that time, and cried as I cried, and she made me food and we ate chocolate together. She was a wonderful friend who spoke a hard truth to me, but then was with me through the pain of that as well. And in hindsight, I am so incredibly glad that she did that, because I'm now with the man that I was meant to be with. But the wounds from a friend can be trusted. And of course, these kind of trusted, sharpening friendships are not typically grown overnight. They are worked at. They need trust. They need vulnerability and respect. We have to practice bringing loving challenge and receiving challenge. It's really risky giving someone some feedback. We risk the person not liking us or raging at us. At the same time, it's hard to receive feedback, isn't it, at times? We might want to withdraw from the friendship or fight back. But this is how friendships go deep, as they work through the friction. And over time, the friction, if mutual and motivated by love, results in us growing in character and in the friendship itself growing in depth. As to how to give challenge and receive challenge, the book of Proverbs also has a lot to offer us. And it would be worth our while to study that, to learn how to do that. But here's a couple of tips that I've just ripped straight from the book of Proverbs. Tips for bringing challenge. If you're someone who finds it particularly difficult in a friendship to speak the truth in love, here's 3 tips. Speak with wisdom and gentleness. Our tone really does matter. Often if we speak a painful truth with a gentle tone, it makes all the difference. Be honest but motivated by love. So stick to the facts, but also check your own motivations here. Why are you bringing this feedback? Is this more about you or is this about your friend? And then, of course, choose the right time and approach. Timing is really important. I think Simon and I have learnt this. There is somewhere in the Bible that says, don't let the sun go down on your anger. Sometimes you need to do that. Sometimes it's wise to go to bed. It's probably not a good time to have a conflict at 2 a.m. It's probably better to go to bed and then discuss it at a different time. And then tips for receiving challenge. How do I receive challenge? Well, here's 3 tips. Embrace correction as a pathway to wisdom. Nobody likes to be criticized, but let's view it as an opportunity for growth. What if there's something in that truth that's being spoken to me that's going to help me actually see things from a different perspective and to grow, to see it as a pathway to wisdom. Second, to listen with humility and an open heart, to recognize I don't have it all together. Nobody has it all together. I've got stuff to learn here. And then finally, assume that your friend is not out to hurt you, but to bring the best out of you. Even if they make a bit of a muff of how they bring that challenge, assume the best in them. Of course, there might be some people who don't have good intentions, and you'll have to sift that through. But generally speaking, if this is your friend, assume that they have good intentions for you. So it's going to take practice to do this well. But let's remember that part of training in wisdom is reflective practice. Do you remember a few weeks back when I talked about the training triad? That if we're going to put wisdom into practice in our life, we have to do that with reflective practice. We need to understand what God wants in this situation and begin to practice it. And so this kind of stuff in relationships takes practice, and it requires humility and courage. We're going to have to take time to just think, about do we find it easier to give challenge than to receive it? Why is that? Are there aspects to bringing challenge that we could work on? Are there aspects to receiving challenge that we need to grow in? When you think about your friendships right there now, is there a mutuality in the challenge, or does it tend to be one way? So we need to practice these things and reflect upon them. But that too is part of our growing. And so friction is necessary for our growth, but also for growing deeper friendships. If we don't have those who bring challenge in our lives, then we might not receive the sharpening that we really need for living out God's purposes in the world. The great A.W. Tozer once said, "Next to the Holy Scriptures, the greatest aid to the life of faith may be Christian friendship." So we've talked about discerning who are going to be the closest people in our lives. We've talked about the role of friction. And finally, now I want to come to you. And this is where we get to the heart of things. Are you the friend that you would want for yourself? Sometimes when we think about friendship, we think about the other person, but we don't actually look at ourselves. And the heart of wisdom in relationship comes back to who you are and what kind of person you want to be. You might have all these expectations of everyone else in your life, but are you the friend that you would want? When you look at that quadrant that I shared earlier of pursuing God, of wanting to grow, of taking responsibility of yourself, of living outwardly, are you the kind of person that's taking that trajectory seriously? Are you the person that someone else would want as their friend? Proverbs 17 verse 18 says, "A friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for a time of adversity." And the emphasis in this proverb is for you to consider, what kind of friend am I? Am I a constant friend? And am I a gracious friend? The proverb says a friend loves at all times, all times. Sadly, we live in a world where a lot of friendships are transactional and therefore temporal. In other words, people build friendships or networks based upon certain economic, social, or emotional benefits that they might gain from the relationship. And there, of course, is a place for that. If we think about working contexts, we've got to have those kind of relationships. But if all your friendships are like that, there's a problem. Because the call to be a true friend is to cherish the other for who they are, not for what they can give you. And this cherishing involves constancy. A friend loves at all times, even when the chips are down, even when it is to their disadvantage to do so. Of course, this constancy entails availability. In other words, it involves time. And again, in our culture, where life is very demanding, busy, and oversubscribed, have we carved out the time necessary to be available to the people in our lives? Nobody goes to their deathbed wishing that they had worked more. But almost everyone wishes they had invested in their friends and their family. Perhaps we need to consider simplifying our lives so that we can create the time we need to be the friend we want. The other dimension of this constancy is grace and understanding. Proverbs 10 verse 12 says, "Hatred stirs up conflict, but love covers over all wrongs." Simon always quotes this verse from 1 Peter 4 to me, "Love covers over a multitude of sins." No, actually I quote it to him. Love covers over a multitude of sins. It's quite an amazing truth. Because in reality, your friends are going to let you down. But are you the kind of friend that is slow to judge and quick to forgive? Because just as friction is a key ingredient in deepening friendships, so is forgiveness. And the two need to work hand in hand. Which leads me to Jesus. Because whilst Proverbs offers godly wisdom for how to relate to others, in reality, we are dealing with people. And as wonderful as people are, they are also broken. And even the best of people are broken and flawed, which means friends will let us down. But guess what? We're going to let them down. Friction is going to arise and raise some ugly things in us that perhaps we're deeply ashamed of. Ugly parts of people's character will come to light. Fears will come into play. And we'll want to either be defensive or we'll want to run away. But it is our very experience of challenge in friendships and in relationships by which we come to experience firsthand this deep truth that each one of us is in need of grace. The Bible says all have fallen short of the glory of God. Each and every one of us. But the good news is that in Jesus, we have a constant friend who will never let us down. He is the friend whose intentions for us are holy, pure, and unsullied. He wants us to be all we can be in him. When he brings challenge or discipline, it is ultimately for our good. He is available to us, and his grace is in every way sufficient. We know this because of the cross. So we may have been hurt in the past. So when it comes to friendships, we're cynical or bitter or withdrawn. We might be afraid to entrust ourselves to others again for fear of getting hurt. And yet at the same time, there is this deep longing to be known and to know. So where do we find the courage to risk making ourselves vulnerable again in friendship? Well, we look to the one who became so vulnerable for us that he died on the cross. And where do we find the compassion to be a friend to people in our lives? We look to our faithful and constant friend, Jesus Christ, whose wounds are the source of our healing. And in a moment, we're going to take communion, and we're going to remind ourselves of this beautiful friendship that we have with God through Jesus Christ. A friendship that will never fail us. But before we do, I want you to take a moment just to, in the stillness of this moment, to reflect upon the following questions, and they'll come up on the screen. How have your closest friends shaped and influenced you over the years? And you might want to give a moment of thanksgiving for those people that God brought into your life who have helped you and shaped you. You might ask the question, how many real friends do I have right now? Friends who will speak truth and love to me. Who are they? How could I be more intentional about deepening the friendships I have and giving more time to them? Do I recognize my life is all over the shop and I don't really have time to build deeper friendships? And then just simply ask this last question. What's the one thing that you think God would have you grow in when it comes to friendships right now? So would you take a little moment to think about those questions? That's why I gave you the notes. You might want to take them away and process that and journal with the Lord in those areas this week. You'll find actually on those notes there's another little page for anyone who wants to start on a prayer partnership or a prayer triplet. There's some questions there that you could ask each other to help develop this kind of sharpening friendship that you might want to use.